In the 2003 Breeders' Cup Turf, something incredible happened. For the first time in Breeders' Cup history, a dead heat occurred. Johar and High Chaparral could not be separated at the wire, finishing at the exact same time. Now, as this race approaches its 20th anniversary, we're gonna break that tie and see who would win. Standing 16 hands, sired by Sadler's Wells out of Kasora by Darshan, I present High Chaparral, a horse slightly more remembered for his stud career than what he did on the track, producing horses who won Grade 1 races from North America to Australia on the flat and over jumps. Now, not every great stud has to be a great racehorse, but High Chaparral was both. He was never too close to the leaders when he raced, always staying at the lower half of the field in the early going. Then he'd release a long and unflinching move in the final quarter of a mile. It was not the fastest turn of foot ever seen, but it was so effective because he never slowed down, overwhelming most opponents and giving him the edge whenever he got into close combat. And it didn't matter the track his turn of foot was on, it worked almost every time. He went on to win 10 of his 13 career races, never finishing worse than third his whole career. The races he won included the Racing Post Trophy at 2, the Epsom and Irish Derbies at 3, and of course his 2 victories in the Breeders' Cup Turf, a feat only ever equaled afterward by Conduit, with those 2 wins also giving him 2 Eclipse Awards for American Champion Turf Horse. Besides losing his very first race, the only race that ever eluded him was the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, which he finished third in twice. But if it wasn't at Longchamp, even the toughest of international opponents could not defeat High Chaparral, taking down horses such as the highly rated Hawkwing, Dubai World Cup winner Moon Ballad, champion 3-year-old Alamshar, and twice defeating Falbrov, a horse who won Grade 1 races in 5 countries, and Soleimani, who won Group 1 races on 3 continents. Overall, High Chaparral was a Class C international competitor who could handle whatever turf race you threw at him, Europe or America. But then came the local horse, who defied the odds and pulled off the dead heat, equaling High Chaparral. Sired by Gone West out of Wind Sharp by Learfan, here is Johar. With one exception, Johar never left the state of California, flying across the Cali turf courses from last to first. He didn't always win, but when he did, it usually was when the pace was fast, forcing the frontrunners to give way for him to fly on the outside. He never won by a lot, only by as much as he needed to, taking his races at the shadow of the wire. At times, he did display other racing styles, but they were less effective, such as nearly wiring the Clement L. Hirsch a start before the Breeders' Cup Turf when there was no pace. But besides those exceptions, Johar was a closer. His overall record is far from the most visually amazing, with 16 starts and 6 wins, but most of his defeats occurred early in his 3-year-old year, as he slowly grew and developed. Although most just know him for his dead heat victory in the Breeders' Cup Turf, his prime really started the October before, in 2002, crescendoing with the Breeders' Cup. In that period, he won 4 of 6 races, including the Oak Tree Derby, the Hollywood Derby, and the San Marcos, where he set a stakes record that still stands today. While some just dismiss him as only beating local California horses, he still did have to defeat international star horses to get on even terms with High Chaparral, defeating Falbrov, Soleimani, the Tin Man, and storming home. Overall, while he never won outside of California, even when horses the world over came to his home turf, he'd still give them a piece of his mind. And now with our 2 contenders covered, we will do the post-parade for this hypothetical race. I wasn't able to get every horse from the 2003 Breeders' Cup Turf, but I like to think I got pretty close. Kicking off our post-parade is number 1 Soleimani, a Grouper Grade 1 winner on 3 separate continents and 5 different countries. He also was responsible for giving Godolphin Racing their 100th Grouper Grade 1 victory when he won the Arlington Million by disqualification. Number 2, our first feuding rival, Johar, winner of the 2003 Breeders' Cup Turf. Number 3, Falbrov, the 3rd wheel to the 2003 Breeders' Cup Turf, losing it by only a neck, but a globetrotter everywhere else. Number 4, Bright Sky, the lone mare in this field and a well-traveled thoroughbred, but all of her greatest performances were in the country of France. Number 5, High Chaparral, the other feuding horse in this race, the 2-time winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf, but one of those he had to share. Number 6, the Tin Man, a horse with incredible longevity, but paradoxically incredible unsoundness. He was a Grade 1 winner from ages 4 all the way to age 9, which is still a record. And lastly, Storming Home. Despite being a good horse, he is most famous for a race he lost, when he drifted out in the final 20 yards of the Arlington Million, unseating Gary Stevens and getting disqualified. And that concludes this field, and now let's get ready for the rematch. And now we're all in line for the tiebreaker, nearly 20 years in the making. And we're off and racing! Out the fastest was the Tin Man on the outside, followed closely by Fall Brav on the rail. Then it was Bright Sky in third, High Chaparral and Soleimani, and then we have Storming Home in the early trailer is going to be Johar as expected. So the leader still is going to be the Tin Man with Fall Brav, but moving up horses is Storming Home and High Chaparral, who are going to battle for third with Bright Sky. These 3 horses are going to form a early wall as the Tin Man and Fall Brav set the early fractions down the stretch the first time around. The Tin Man in front by 2 lengths as we hit the wire and complete Circuit 1. Fall Brav second. Then it's High Chaparral, Bright Sky, and Storming Home, followed then by Soleimani, who's making up ground, and then we have the trailer Johar. High Chaparral begins to drop behind horses as Soleimani begins to move up. Johar staying in his position, determined to close from last to first, but Fall Brav is beginning to move up. Fall Brav and the Tin Man begin to lock up together for the lead, with Bright Sky in the 3rd position. Soleimani has moved all the way up to 4th and now in 3rd place, and he's continuing to accelerate with High Chaparral right behind. Storming Home is behind horses second to last, and Johar is somewhat disconnected from the field. He has a lot to do and is still biding his time. Fall Brav is now the sole leader of this race. The Tin Man begins to give way. On the outside, High Chaparral and Soleimani. Johar is still behind horses, and now we're into the top of the stretch. High Chaparral has asked for his run. He goes on by Fall Brav, and he goes on by Soleimani, but Johar has something to say. He's finally getting into it. On the outside, Johar is flying late. Can High Chaparral hang on? The answer is yes! High Chaparral ain't sharing no first place for Johar today. This time, it's all him. So this episode was definitely a bit easier to decide than the others. Johar was certainly a great horse in California, but High Chaparral was a great horse on 2 continents. Everything Johar has been able to do, High Chaparral seems to have one-upped. The horses he defeated, and his major wins. Johar and High Chaparral may share a Breeders' Cup race, but High Chaparral still has one on his own. Every great horse that Johar defeated, so did High Chaparral, and more. And the main reason Johar was able to get on even terms with High Chaparral was because it was on his home turf, where he had won all but one of his career races. Have the race on High Chaparral's home turf, it's not going to be so close, as proven by Johar's 16th place finish in the Japan Cup, just 1 start after. Of course, there were other factors that led to such a finish, but Johar was never able to prove otherwise that he could win outside of California. In almost every conceivable way, High Chaparral is a higher achieving horse. While the percentages are a lot higher at any other track, when the 2 are paired at Santa Anita, I give High Chaparral 70% and Johar 30%. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Horse Racing Versus, talking about 2 great turf horses. But now it's time for a very special preview of the next episode of Horse Racing Versus. June 9th, 1973. Nearly 50 years ago, Secretariat did something that no one would ever forget, leading to him being proclaimed the greatest racehorse of all time. But not without debate. People weren't so quick to forget the original Big Red, Man o' War. He would be voted the greatest of the 20th century over Secretariat. So in light of this special anniversary, it's time to put these 2 legends against each other in the next episode of Horse Racing Versus.